views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Welcome to today's verdict. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesch. We have a great show today. The viewers have sent in requests and we are happy to oblige. You wanted to know, do you have the right to be able to fire an employee if that employee fails to be vaccinated? Well, we have an employment expert on the show, and Peter Rahbar, will be giving you the answer. We also have a well-known defense attorney, Jeff Miller, on the show. He's going to be discussing what it's like from a defendant's perspective in terms of the insurance companies, in terms of giving money out during the pandemic, as opposed to being able to try cases. Very interesting segment. And finally, leading our show is a professor in political science at Baruch, discussing the insurrection, the impeachment, and now the possible trial involving former President Trump. As you can see, we have a lot to get to, so stay tuned. Today's verdict starts right now. I'm your host, David Lesch. We have a great show today. Our first guest is Viviana Rivera Burgos, the assistant professor of political science at Baruch College. Viviana, nice to see you today. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
It's our pleasure. It's been a pretty interesting few weeks, at the very least. There's not really much to say about the insurrection other than the fact that it's obviously going to be a terrible stain on our history for years to come. I want to jump right into, if you could help us out, the process now that we're past impeachment, we're past inauguration. What are your thoughts, your initial thoughts as we move into this new era of President Biden?
Yeah, well, I think there's a sense of renewed hope and optimism for a lot of people, but of course there's a huge segment of the country that does not feel that way and that questions the legitimacy of this new administration and this government. So we'll have to see how things play out. But I think in terms of the impeachment, I don't even know what to say either, like what to predict about it.
We're moving from the impeachment phase to the trial phase, the conviction phase. Some on one side of the fence say, look, do we really need to go through the trial phase? Mr. Trump, he's not President Trump anymore. He's in Florida. Do we need to divide the country further? Mm-hmm. Others say, listen, got to teach him a lesson. We can't let this happen again, and we don't want him ever to run for office. What are your thoughts on the actual trial?
Yeah, exactly. I think you've hit the nail on the head with that's the dilemma that we're seeing. So first, it's definitely unprecedented to have a president be impeached twice. And he's only the third president to be impeached in the history of the US, but no president has ever been convicted by the Senate. So it is an unlikely scenario, especially given the fact that it requires a 2/3 vote in the Senate. So Democrats, even though they have, it's a very slim majority, they actually need a super majority. So they would need to convince 17 Republicans to vote in favor of convicting Donald Trump. And I think that's a difficult task. And so going back to the dilemma that you brought up, some people have said, some constitutional scholars or even lawyers, Republican lawyers have argued that the trial is unconstitutional precisely because Donald Trump is no longer president. And this was set out in the Constitution to remove a sitting president, not someone who is no longer president. But then others say, no, it's actually The Constitution does allow for the trial to proceed even after the president has stepped down. And it would teach him a lesson, like you can't just let someone get away with doing something illegal, a former president, I mean.
Well, Professor, let me ask you a question, because I know there's 16 or 17 votes that we would need to pick up for the conviction. Some say, and I think this is correct, that if people do not show up for the vote, the number is much less, and that if there is a certain amount of Republicans who don't even appear and don't show up, you may not need the 16 or 17. It's going to be a little bit less. Have you heard that?
I actually haven't. I'm not sure if it's 2/3 of the senators that are present or 2/3 of the entire body. I believe it's
sure. I believe it's 2/3 who actually show up, and decide to vote. So if some Republicans want to really protect themselves politically, not abstain. That's even a vote.
I mean, it's like a symbolic abstention, though, if they just don't show up on that day, right?
Yeah. So that's interesting. But let me ask you a question. What is your prediction? What do you think? Do you think that they're going to get the 16, 17 votes, or do you think they're actually going to be successful in prosecuting him and convicting him?
I don't like speculating or predicting the future. I'm honestly just not sure. I know Mitch McConnell or Chuck Schumer said that he and Mitch McConnell are working on a bipartisan agreement about how to proceed with the trial. So I think the first question is whether we will actually see the trial take place. And in that I'm more certain of. But what the outcome of the trial will be, I'm not sure. I have no idea.
Let's move a little bit further out now, as we begin to heal as a society, as a country. Do you think he's the right man for the job, President Biden, in terms of his calmness? Do you think he's gonna be able to unite from both sides of the aisle?
I think so. I think one of his attributes that is exactly what you just said. He seems to have a really good temperament. He's very calm and very poised. However, I'm not sure that we can put it entirely on him in terms, of course, the president does play a big role in, as we have seen in the past 4 years, in uniting the country or dividing it. But I think it's about a lot more than that. I think leaders from both parties also are tasked with that job, and we'll have to see if they're up for that or not. But we have a huge, like I mentioned at the beginning, a huge amount of people in the country who question the legitimacy of Biden's presidency, who still to this day believe that the election was fraudulent. It's 60-something% of Republicans, I believe. So I think it's up to Republican leaders as well. A lot of them either agreed with Trump's claims or remained quiet. So I think it's up to them now to kind of get people to trust that the election was indeed legitimate, that the precedent is there because he won fair and square. And that would go a long way in uniting the country.
I'm going to just ask you one last question, because as a political science professor, you must have a ton of stuff now that you can either teach your students or go into for the next couple of years. I mean, I'm sure you could tweak your curriculum for some very interesting points of view. Do you think that's something where you're going to go, or what do you think?
Yeah, so I think it's so interesting. There's so much material every day. So it's actually, last semester I found it hard to stick to my lesson plans because I wanted to teach students about historical things, but then there was so much currently going on. So it's always a challenge to balance that. But I definitely want to teach them more, I think, about, for example, the rise of white nationalism in the country, the historical roots of that, which is not always included in introductory American politics courses. The pandemic, how it'll continue to unfold and be handled by different administrations now. So yeah, there's so much material.
Certainly, it's a hot major. Well, listen, we want to thank you very much for being here. Hopefully you'll come back in the next couple of weeks and give us a little bit of update on the healing of our country.
Thank you.
Politically.
That would be great.
Okay, thank you, Professor. All right, stay with us. we have so much more to get to. Today's verdict will be right back. All right, we are pleased to have with us today Jeffrey Miller, the executive partner at Pillinger Miller, who I, by the way, know personally, and we're very lucky to have on the show today. Jeffrey, how are you doing today?
Excellent. Thanks for having us, David.
It's my pleasure. All right, so we've been on opposite ends of some cases before, so we're fairly familiar with the kind of work we do. In the past, my experience has been in terms of insurance monies. Sometimes insurance companies are not so easily, dispensing of their funds, rightly or wrongly, because they hold the monies and they are able to keep their monies and invest it and make monies themselves. But things have been changing. Am I correct? And at least it looks like with the COVID pandemic, cases are starting to settle. Why don't you tell the viewers a little bit about how things have changed?
There's no question. You're absolutely right, David. And thanks for having us. We're going to go over 6 things you must know about settling cases during this pandemic. And the carriers are ready. They want to move cases.
Well, was there an impetus? Was there something in particular, Jeff, that came along that made some of the carriers say, all right, this is a great time to move the backlog? Or was it just a change in philosophy? Or maybe it was both?
I really think that the unfortunate situation of COVID and the slowdown in the judiciary and the furloughs and the court personnel have made the carriers realize that they're not going to be able to get the help from the judiciary and the courthouses to move their cases. So they're relying on defense counsel, plaintiff counsel such as yourself to move these cases now.
Now, there's particular cases, though, I think that you've been dealing with that are ripe. What types of cases are they?
Certainly. Pillinger Miller Turalo is a regional firm that has offices in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and as well as Walnut Creek, California. We do all civil tort litigation, everything from workers' comp to asbestos and everything in between. And we've had great success, especially in the auto, premises / habitational, construction, bar, tavern, restaurant cases recently over this past year in the mediation mode in getting rid of our cases.
All right, let's get right into it. Let's talk about some of the ways that you and your firm go about moving these types of cases and why you have been so successful over the last 6 to 9 months.
Great, thanks. This is going to be point 1. You must know, carriers are craving settlements. We touched on it a little earlier. As a side note, Pillinger Miller Turalo just resolved 1,250 cases during this COVID. I mean, that's a crazy number. That's more than some judges' total dockets. We're joined at the hip with counsel such as yourself, the carriers, and we're in the resolution business. That's what we're here to do. You know, and I know most of these cases settle. 98% of these cases settle. Another 2% through trial or motion practice. We're in the resolution business. So now's the time to resolve cases. They love saving the cost. Carriers love not paying defense counsel. They hate defense counsel's bills. So if they can resolve a case and get rid of it, it's the greatest thing. They're craving these settlements. We could move on to number 2 of the things that you must know during this pandemic to get rid of these cases. There's no cavalry. There's no cavalry coming here. We touched upon it earlier. We are who you need to get rid of these cases. With reductions in the court personnel, the judiciary, and furloughs, the judges just don't have the time and aren't even there to help you move your case along. As we know, the courts have been closed with very limited ability to get into court. We have a habitational premises program with Everest National. At the beginning of this, they said to me, why don't you put 25 cases into a mediation and see how we do? We got rid of 24 out of 25 cases.
Are you finding some resistance from some of the plaintiff attorneys? In other words, pushing for a trial, or are most of them amenable into moving them a little bit earlier?
You know what? Most of them really are amenable because I think everybody knows that there's going to be a big delay in getting that day at trial. Unfortunate for the injured people. They really are not able to get an immediate trial right now I think the plaintiff bar itself is also willing to expedite and move these things along. The third thing that you must know, if you're going to be settling cases during this pandemic, is DIY. Do it yourself. Get it done. Now more than ever, the emphasis is on the individual attorneys, both plaintiffs and defendants, to focus on resolving cases. I find that mediation submissions are a critical part and should be done while mediating a case. It's your chance to get there before the mediator and let them know what your position is. Everyone has to take responsibility. It's on you to move these cases. You have to do it yourself. We have, just like with yourself in your office, we have various relationships with many offices where we'll call up and we say, hey, we got 8 cases, we got 12 cases. Let's do a mediation day. Let's put on our cases. And we've been very successful with Sachs, Subin, Block and O'Toole, various offices, Wingate's office in doing that.
I know them all very well. Wingate's, Subin, I know them all well. Do you think this is the new normal, Jeff? Do you think that this is going to be the way we go forward? Less trials, more dispute resolution where we're kind of getting together and just, let's move this? What do you think?
I really do, and I see that, and I agree with you fully. Many years ago, I interned for Judge Johnson. He was one of the first mediators. And I was like, wow, this is a great thing. You take it out of the judicial forum and you get to an independent private mediation service. And 25, 30 years later, here we are. And we're seeing what's going on, and especially with what's going on in the judiciary. I think this is the future.
You know what I want to ask you? Let's say somebody's watching now. There's a plaintiff's attorney who's watching, wants to move some cases. They have them with your firm, with your carrier. How do they go about it? Do they reach out to you? Do they reach out to the carrier? Do they reach out to the judge? Is it all free?
All of it works. Our doors are always open. They can contact me, our office, anytime, and we are interested in moving those cases, and we will get those mediation days set.
Is there a particular threshold in terms of money, or are there all cases? Doesn't matter.
We've settled cases in mediation from legitimately $7,500 to $25 million.
We don't have too much time. Give me another tip. Give me something else.
Okay, number 4, you must know. Is it too early to settle? No, never. It's never too early to settle. We have a program with American Empire construction program. They come in quarterly and we settle cases pre-deposition, 7-figure settlements, pre-depositions. You just got to get the facts, gather some medicals, and you could value a case. It is never too early. Don't let a demand push you off. Get rid of it.
By the way, just so we know, just so we get you, where do we find you? Just so the viewers understand that.
You can always get Jeff Miller at email, which is jmiller@PMT, Peter Mary Tom lawfirm.com, or our website, www.pmtlaw.com.
Okay, final tip before I let you go. Someone's watching, they want to move a case, they're not sure what to do. What do you say?
Call up, get proactive, keep it moving. These people want to settle cases. The carriers have money for you. They're looking to get rid of their oldest cases. There's nothing too early. There's nothing too late. It's not like a fine wine. They will not get better with age. I guarantee you that. Get rid of your cases now.
Pillinger Miller, Jeff Miller, I want to thank you very much for being here. As usual, you guys are great. Hopefully you come back in the next couple of weeks and let us know how the program's going. What do you say?
Your team and Yesenia, thanks for having us. Thank you very much and stay safe.
It's our pleasure. All right, stay with us. Today's verdict will be right back. More after this. We are back and we are welcoming back Peter Rahbar, our employment lawyer expert. Peter, how are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me back, David.
Well, we had a lot of positive feedback the last time you were on, and this is certainly a topic. This is a topic that is completely novel, at least to our show. We've never tackled it before, and the discussion has gone on throughout the legal community, and I don't know the answers. So that's why we have you here. And the question is, with the vaccinations and the fact that it's finally out there, what do you do if you have an employee who doesn't want to be vaccinated? What are your rights as an employer and maybe we could talk a little bit of rights as the employee, when someone doesn't want to be vaccinated? It's all you.
Sure. Well, it is a hot topic, and one we're going to be talking a lot about over the next few months as vaccine rollout, really ramps up, or hopefully ramps up. I spend most of the weekend trying to get appointments from my parents and just end up hitting refresh all day. But here's the few things I think that both employers and employees should know, okay? And from the guidance we have from the government so far, from the federal government, is that employers, depending on what the business is, can mandate vaccines, and they can mandate that their employees be vaccinated. And we all know that there's a certain segment of our population that is resistant to vaccines, doesn't trust them for, a variety of reasons. But we also know that there are people who have legitimate health reasons for not getting vaccines, and also legitimate religious reasons for not getting vaccines. So what the government has said is that employer, you can mandate vaccines, but you also have to accommodate people who have medical conditions that would prevent them from getting vaccines, and also religious reasons for not getting it.
Let's talk about some of the reasons that you may be able to show your employer. What type of medical, because a lot of people say, well, I'm thinking of maybe having a child in the future, and it could affect fertility. I mean, how do you know what's considered to be a true medical reason?
Right. So that's a really good question. I mean, it has to be, I would say at this stage, and we don't know because we haven't seen the cases yet. This really hasn't developed. This is all sort of informed speculation based on similar, conditions in the past. But it would have to be a demonstrable medical need. So it would have to be like, for instance, we've heard about people having allergic reactions, or there would have to be some sort of documented, cross reaction with another medication you're taking, or an impact on another health condition that you have that would prevent you from getting it. So it would have to be a legitimate need. And what the guidance says so far is you have to have a dialogue with your employer about it, and the employer is obligated to have that dialogue with you to figure out, A, what is the medical need or the religious need, and B, can we accommodate it? And that's the discussion that needs to have first.
Well, yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about the accommodation. It's not always so easy to accommodate an employee. For instance, let's say you're in the medical field and you want somebody to treat, somebody very closely, where you actually they are going to be in the vicinity of those who are visiting your office. You're inviting them in. Could be even a dental situation where you have somebody working on a patient. How do you accommodate? They're trained to be right there in the face of the person you're inviting in. How does that work?
Well, look, I mean, there's going to be some situations where an employer can accommodate it. And, in those cases, the employer has an ability to terminate an employee for that. And so you bring up a really good example. I mean, in a medical office or dental office, these are certainly situations where there's a huge potential, very high likelihood for transmission. And the government puts out this whole direct threat test that you have to go through to evaluate accommodations. And so you could say there's a direct threat of transmission there, similar in an environment where, like education, for example. And that's why we see, teachers being bumped up to the top of the list of people who need to be vaccinated or who could get vaccinated. Any client-facing business, I mean, there are going to be places where it's going to be very hard to accommodate. Now, if you're in an office like mine or like yours, I think it's a different conversation.
So I assume you shouldn't say, and I want proof. I want it today. You better come back. I mean, there's a way to go about it to really encourage somebody to get it. But speaking of which, can you require proof?
Yeah, absolutely. You can require proof. I agree with you. I mean, common sense is so important here, and fairness and decency. I mean, a lot of employers we're seeing already are paying people to get vaccines, are giving them incentives to do it, are giving them time off, so all the things you mentioned, like those are things that good employers will do because they know for some people it's a difficult decision, and it's better to get it done this way through, working together and addressing, fears that people may have, educating them on the vaccine, dispelling some of the rumors they may be hearing from their family and friends, and getting them to get it voluntarily without a policy.
Not to throw a complete wrench in this, but what if an employee wants the employer to get the vaccination? I mean, that's completely possible. What if my staff comes in and says, "Hey, David, where's your proof?" There's so many nuances here. I don't even know.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Just keeps going and going.
Yeah, you could spin it, and I'm sure once we see the vaccine become more available, we're going to see a lot of crazy things we didn't even think of. But certainly, if you're going to have a policy requiring your employees to get it, you better get it too.
I would agree.
And if they come to you and say, "Hey, you got to follow your own policy," then you better be ready to do it. But I think generally, that would be a good idea anyway. I mean, if that's what your employees need, that's the assurance they need, then you should be ready to give it.
You also talked about a little bit a written policy, right? The employer should have some kind of written policy. I'm sure you can help them with that, or just something that we can do as attorneys to help employers know what to do. Am I correct?
Right. A written policy is really important because you don't want to announce this and then selectively enforce it and then have someone come to you and say, "No, you don't have to get it," or whatever. You want to be very clear. People are looking for clear guidance and instruction, during this time. So be very clear what the rules are. Be very clear, do you have to come back after 2 doses? Can you come back after the first dose? When does it have to be done by? If an employer, the greatest thing an employer could do right now is find a way to secure vaccine slots, and so if you have preferred.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
Yeah, if you have the ability to do that, you should do that. And as the rollout increases, I think we'll see more opportunities to do that. But if there's preferred providers, certainly that should be spelled out in the policy. So the policy will help it out. Every employer should have a handbook anyway, so it should be part of it. And certainly a lawyer can help draft that.
And certainly you can, because we got a lot of positive feedback last time you were on. People were looking for you. We're going to have your information up on the screen. Peter Rahbar, our employment expert. Peter, be safe.
Thanks for having me on. All right.
It's a pleasure. All right, hang with us. We'll be back with more Today's Verdict right after this. Well, that's all we have for today. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us, and of course you, the viewers, for watching. If you have a topic or issue that you'd like to see on the show, feel free to email me at davidlesch@bronxnet.org. Always remember, know the issues, reach a verdict. We'll see you next time.